Please marry me." The words hung in the air like a gunshot, freezing every conversation on the street. Evelyn Cross, tech billionaire, Forbes, cover regular, single mother of two, knelt on the cracked pavement outside a neighborhood market, holding out her hand to a man the world had taught itself not to see. Noah Reed didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. He studied her face with eyes that had seen too much, then spoke in a voice that cut through the gathering crowd. "You don't know what you're asking for." But Evelyn didn't stand. She didn't apologize. She simply waited, because something in his refusal told her more than any yes could have. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was the beginning of something that would unravel everything both of them thought they understood about worth, dignity, and what it means to be seen. Before we begin, I invite you to follow this story to the very end, and please leave a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The morning had started like any other for Evelyn Cross, which meant it started at 5:30 with coffee she barely tasted and emails she answered before her children woke. By 7, she'd already participated in 2 overseas conference calls, reviewed a product launch timeline, and reminded herself for the 3rd time that week that success didn't require sleep, just discipline. Her assistant had blocked the afternoon for a site visit to a potential acquisition in the industrial district, but a last-minute board emergency pushed it to evening. So when her driver pulled up outside the address at 6:45, the sun had already started its descent behind the warehouses, casting long shadows across streets that didn't appear on tourist maps. Evelyn stepped out, heels clicking against pavement that had seen better decades. The neighborhood didn't match the corporate profile she'd reviewed. The building she'd come to evaluate sat wedged between a laundromat and a corner market with hand-painted signs advertising produce in 3 languages. People moved with purpose here, tired purpose, the kind that came from double shifts and unpaid overtime. She glanced at her phone. Her assistant had sent the wrong address. The actual property was 6 blocks west. Evelyn sighed, about to get back in the car, when her daughter's voice echoed in her memory from breakfast that morning. "Mom, you never see anything anymore. You just go from building to building." Something made her pause. "Give me 15 minutes, she told her driver. "I'll walk the neighborhood." He looked uncertain. This wasn't protocol, but Evelyn was already moving toward the market, drawn by nothing more than impulse and the fading light that made everything look almost golden. The market was small, crowded, vibrant in the way places become when they serve communities rather than demographics. She wandered past produce stands where vendors called out prices, past a butcher shop where an old man wrapped meat in brown paper with the precision of ritual, past a corner where teenagers shared a phone and laughed at something she'd never understand. And then she saw him. He sat against the brick wall beside the market entrance, legs drawn up, head resting against the stone. His clothes were worn but not filthy, his beard untrimmed but not wild. What struck her wasn't his appearance, it was the book in his lap. She couldn't see the title from this distance, but she could see his concentration, the way his finger traced the lines as he read, utterly absorbed. People passed him without looking. A woman stepped around him as if he were part of the architecture. A delivery truck driver nearly backed into him, never glancing his way. He was invisible, not because he tried to hide, but because everyone had decided not to see him. Evelyn found herself walking closer. Up close, she noticed details the distance had hidden. The book was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, its spine cracked from repeated reading. His hands, though weathered, moved across the pages with a gentleness that suggested reverence rather than habit. And when he finally sensed her presence and looked up, his eyes held something she hadn't expected. Clarity. Not the foggy distance of intoxication or the desperate plea of practiced begging, but a sharp, assessing intelligence that seemed to catalog everything about her in a single glance. "Can I help you?" His voice was quiet, measured, with an accent that suggested education buried under circumstances. Evelyn realized she was staring. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your reading." "You didn't interrupt. You're just standing there." He closed the book carefully, marking his place with a receipt. "Most people don't even slow down." "I noticed that." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with the same intensity she'd felt directed at his book. "You're not from this neighborhood." It wasn't a question. Evelyn smiled despite herself. "What gave me away?" "The shoes cost more than 6 months' rent around here. The watch could probably cover a year. He said it without judgment, just observation. And you're looking at me like I'm supposed to be something else. The directness caught her off guard. She was used to deference, to careful corporate diplomacy, to people who wanted something but never said it plainly. This man had nothing to gain from her and seemed utterly unbothered by her presence. "What should I be looking at you like?" she asked. He considered the question seriously. "Like I'm a person reading a book on a street corner. Nothing more complicated than that." Something in his response made her chest tighten. When was the last time someone had refused to perform for her? When had someone last insisted on being seen as exactly what they were? "You're right," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm sorry." He blinked, surprised. Most people don't apologize. Most people don't stop to talk. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth, then disappeared. He glanced at the book in his lap, then back at her. "You should probably keep walking. This neighborhood gets rougher after dark, and you don't exactly blend in." It was dismissal, gentle but firm. Evelyn recognized the tactic. She used it herself in board meetings when she wanted someone to leave without making a scene. But something made her stay. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated, as if names were currencies he'd learned not to spend carelessly. "Noah." "Noah." She let the name settle. "I'm Evelyn." "I know who you are," he said simply. "You're on the business news. That tech company, Cross Dynamics. You built it from nothing, turned it into a billion-dollar empire, did it all while raising kids alone." He paused. "They call you the Iron Duchess, the woman who never blinks." Evelyn felt something strange. Was it pleasure that he recognized her, or discomfort that her public persona had reached even here? "The media likes narratives," she said carefully, "and you gave them a good one." Noah looked at her directly, and she realized his eyes were gray, storm cloud gray. "Self-made billionaire, single mother, corporate warrior. It's a hell of a story." "You sound skeptical." "I sound like someone who knows stories are just stories." He shifted against the wall, and she caught a wince he tried to hide. "The real stuff happens in between the headlines." Before Evelyn could respond, a group of teenagers approached, laughing among themselves. One of them, a boy maybe 16, with a swagger that didn't quite mask his uncertainty, paused when he saw Noah. "Hey, Professor," the kid said, dipping his head slightly. "You staying here tonight?" Noah nodded. "Planning on it." "There's supposed to be rain. Marco's got that tarp you can use if you need it." "Appreciate it, Carlos." The boy nodded, then glanced at Evelyn with open curiosity before his friends called him away. The exchange lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it told Evelyn volumes. This man wasn't anonymous here. He had relationships, history, a place in this neighborhood's social fabric, however marginalized. "Professor?" she asked after the teenagers left. Noah's expression closed slightly. "Old joke. I used to help kids with homework sometimes. They started calling me that." "Used to?" "The shelter program cut their tutoring budget. Kids still come by sometimes, but it's not official anymore." He opened his book again, a clear signal that the conversation was ending. "You should go. Your driver's probably wondering where you are." Evelyn glanced back at the street where her car waited, then back at Noah. She couldn't explain what held her there, what strange gravitational pull made walking away feel like abandoning something important. "Do you need anything?" she asked, then immediately regretted the phrasing. It sounded like charity, like pity, like everything she'd been trying to avoid. Noah's response was cold, immediate. "I need people to stop asking me that question." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." He closed the book again, but this time his movements were sharp, final. "You meant exactly that. You saw a homeless man reading philosophy and thought it was touching, thought it deserved some kind of reward. Maybe you'll give me $20. Feel good about yourself. Tell your friends at brunch about the fascinating person you met. But here's what you don't get. I'm not a project. I'm not a story you get to feel good about telling. I'm just a person trying to make it through the day without being treated like garbage or a goddamn inspiration. So thank you, but no thank you. I don't need anything from you except to be left alone." The words hit like a slap. Evelyn felt heat rise in her face, embarrassment, anger, shame, all tangled together. He was right. Every word was right, and it burned. "I apologize," she said, voice tight. You're absolutely correct. That was condescending. She turned to leave, had taken 3 steps when Noah spoke again. Wait. Evelyn stopped but didn't turn around. That was harsh, Noah said quietly. You didn't deserve all of that. It's just… He paused, and when he continued, his voice had lost its edge. It's been a long time since someone looked at me like a person first. When it happens, I get suspicious. I shouldn't have taken that out on you. Evelyn turned slowly. Noah was standing now, the book tucked under his arm, his posture careful as if movement caused pain. What happened to you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Noah's smile was bitter. What makes you think something happened? Because intelligent men don't end up on street corners by accident. Maybe intelligence is overrated. I don't believe that. And neither do you. They stood in the growing darkness, 2 people from different worlds who somehow found themselves in the same moment, unable to look away. The market vendors were closing up. The street was emptying. Soon, Noah would be alone again, and Evelyn would return to her world of board meetings and quarterly reports, and this strange encounter would fade into the category of things that almost meant something. But Evelyn Cross hadn't built an empire by walking away from things that unsettled her. Have dinner with me, she said. Noah laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. What? Dinner. There's a restaurant 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but the reviews are good. Come have dinner with me. Why would you want that? Because you're right. I was being condescending. Let me apologize properly. Apologizing doesn't require feeding me. No, but I'm hungry, and eating alone is depressing. Evelyn met his eyes. And because you're the first person in 6 months who's told me exactly what they think without calculating the political angle first, that's worth at least a meal. Noah studied her for a long moment. She could see him weighing options, considering angles, looking for the trap he assumed must be hidden somewhere in the offer. One condition, he said finally. Name it. You don't ask me how I ended up here. Not tonight. If we're having dinner, we have dinner. Not therapy, not an investigation. Just 2 people eating food. Evelyn nodded slowly. Agreed. And you're paying, obviously. She smiled despite everything. Obviously. The restaurant was called Maria's, and it occupied the ground floor of a converted brownstone that had probably been beautiful once and was fighting its way back to beauty through sheer determination. Inside, the walls were painted warm yellow, the tables were mismatched but clean, and the smell of garlic and cilantro made Evelyn's stomach remind her she'd skipped lunch. Maria herself, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything twice, looked up when they entered. Her eyes went from Evelyn to Noah and back again, her face revealing nothing. Sit anywhere, she said. Menus are on the tables. They chose a booth near the back. Noah moved stiffly, and Evelyn noticed him favoring his left side as he slid into the seat. He saw her noticing and his jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The menu was simple, home cooking, the kind that took time and tasted like someone cared. Evelyn ordered the mole poblano. Noah ordered the same, plus a side of rice and beans, and when the water came, he drank it like he'd been walking through deserts. When did you last eat? Evelyn asked, then caught herself. Sorry, not my business. Yesterday morning, the shelter serves breakfast until 9. Noah refilled his water glass from the pitcher Maria had left. I'm not starving. Don't look at me like that. I'm not looking at you like anything. You're absolutely looking at me like something. But there was no anger in it now, just tired amusement. They fell into silence. Evelyn checked her phone. 3 missed calls from her assistant, 2 text messages from her daughter asking when she'd be home, 1 email from the board chair that could probably wait until morning. She put the phone face down on the table. Your family doesn't know where you are, Noah observed. They know I'm at a business dinner. Is that what this is? Evelyn considered the question. I'm not sure what this is. That makes 2 of us. The food arrived quickly, steaming plates that looked like they'd been made by someone who understood that cooking was an act of love. Noah ate slowly, deliberately, as if teaching himself to pace each bite. Evelyn found herself eating slower too, matching his rhythm without deciding to. This is incredible, she said after a few minutes. Noah nodded. Maria doesn't cut corners. Her daughter tried to convince her to expand, turn this into a chain. Maria told her some things aren't meant to be replicated. You come here often. When I can afford it. Every couple of weeks, maybe. Maria knows me. Sometimes she gives me the scraps, the good scraps, the things that don't make it to the menu. She never makes a thing of it. Evelyn watched him, this man who read philosophy on street corners and had relationships with restaurant owners who showed him quiet kindness. Nothing about him fit the narrative she'd been taught about homelessness. Not the addictions, not the mental illness, not the personal failings that society used to explain away human suffering. You're doing it again, Noah said without looking up from his plate. Doing what? Trying to figure me out, like I'm a puzzle that needs solving. Maybe you are. Or maybe I'm just a person eating dinner. He set down his fork and finally met her eyes. You want to know, don't you? You want the story, the explanation, the reason. You told me not to ask. I did, but you're thinking it so loudly I can practically hear it. He leaned back in the booth, studying her with that same unsettling directness. Here's what I'll tell you. Whatever story you're creating in your head right now, it's probably more interesting than the truth. The truth is boring. The truth is that life happens, and sometimes people fall, and the longer you're down, the harder it is to stand back up. That's it. No drama, no cinematic tragedy, just gravity. But Evelyn heard what he didn't say, heard it in the careful way he chose words, in the intelligence that structured his sentences, in the exhaustion that lived behind his eyes. You don't believe that, she said quietly. What don't I believe? That your story is boring. You're too smart to fall without someone pushing. Noah's expression hardened. Maybe I jumped. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to examine. Maria approached with coffee, breaking the tension, and they accepted the cups gratefully. What do you do all day? Evelyn asked, shifting to safer ground. When you're not reading Marcus Aurelius. Noah wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, absorbing its warmth. I walk, read at the library when it's open, help kids with homework when they ask, watch people, think. That's all? You say that like it's not enough. He smiled slightly. Most people spend their whole lives doing everything except thinking. Maybe I'm the lucky one. Are you happy? The question surprised them both. Noah considered it seriously, sipping his coffee before answering. No, he said finally, but I'm not miserable either. I exist. Some days that feels like an accomplishment. Evelyn thought about her own life, the endless meetings, the constant pressure, the success that had cost her a marriage and left her children with a mother who was more phantom than presence. She'd built an empire, changed an industry, made millions. And yet, sitting across from this homeless man in a tiny restaurant that smelled like home, she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly present in her own life. What about you? Noah asked. Are you happy? No one had asked her that in years. Successful? Yes. Effective? Absolutely. Admired, envied, profiled. But happy. I have everything I'm supposed to want, Evelyn said carefully. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. They finished their meal in comfortable silence. When Maria brought the check, Evelyn paid without looking at the total and added a tip that made Maria's eyebrows rise slightly. Outside, the night had fully settled. The street was quieter now, just a few people hurrying home. The market closed, the lights in apartment windows creating a patchwork of other people's lives. Thank you for dinner, Noah said, and for not asking the questions you wanted to ask. Thank you for coming, for tolerating me. They stood there, neither moving toward goodbye. Evelyn's car was half a block away. Noah would return to his spot by the market wall. This moment would end, as moments always did, and they would both return to their separate orbits. But something in Evelyn refused to accept that conclusion. What if I could offer you something? She said suddenly. Not charity, not pity, something real. Noah's expression became wary. Like what? A job? At my company? He laughed, but it was hollow. Doing what? I don't have a resume. I don't have references. I don't even have a permanent address. You have intelligence. You have dignity. You have the ability to see through nonsense. which is rarer than you think in corporate America. Evelyn felt momentum building, the same instinct that guided her in board negotiations. I'm serious. Come work for me. You don't know anything about me. I know you read philosophy. I know teenagers call you professor. I know you eat slowly because you've learned not to take anything for granted. I know you're not drunk, not high, not incoherent. And I know that whatever put you on that street corner, it wasn't stupidity. She paused. That's more than I know about most of the people I hire. Noah stared at her like she'd lost her mind. This is insane. Probably. You're a billionaire CEO. You can't just offer homeless people jobs based on dinner conversation. Well, I built my company on instinct, on seeing things other people miss, on taking chances that look insane until they work. Evelyn stepped closer. Tell me I'm wrong about you. Tell me there's nothing buried under the circumstances. Tell me you're exactly what people assume when they step over you on the sidewalk. Tell me that, and I'll walk away. Noah opened his mouth, closed it, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. You don't know what you're offering. Then tell me what I'm missing. I'm broken, he said, voice rough. I'm so broken you can't even see all the pieces. If you bring me into your world, I'll disappoint you. I'll fail. And you'll regret every second of this conversation. Let me worry about my regrets. Evelyn pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. This is my direct line, and the address for my company headquarters. If you change your mind, when you change your mind, call me. Or just show up. I'll make sure you're allowed in. Noah took the card like it might burn him. Why are you doing this? Because someone once took a chance on me when everyone else said I'd fail, because I'm tired of pretending success means having everything figured out, because she stopped, surprised by what she was about to say. Because you're the first real person I've talked to in longer than I can remember. She turned and walked toward her car before he could respond, before she could second-guess herself, before the reasonable part of her brain could catalog all the ways this was a terrible idea. Her driver opened the door. She slid inside, and as the car pulled away, she looked back once. Noah stood on the sidewalk, the business card still in his hand, staring after her with an expression she couldn't read. Her phone rang immediately. Her assistant panicked about the missed meeting. Evelyn answered, sliding back into her executive voice, making apologies and rescheduling as the car carried her back toward her neighborhood, her house, her life. But she couldn't stop thinking about gray eyes and a borrowed book and the way someone had chosen to see her as a person rather than a reputation. 3 days passed. Evelyn threw herself into work with the intensity that had made her famous. Product launches, investor meetings, crisis management when a supply chain delay threatened quarterly numbers. She didn't mention the dinner to anyone. It felt too fragile to speak out loud, like naming it might make it disappear. On the 4th day, her assistant buzzed her office. Ms. Cross, there's someone in the lobby asking for you. He doesn't have an appointment. Evelyn's heart jumped. Name? A pause. He said you'd know. Think he might be homeless, Ms. Cross. Security wants to know if they should send him up immediately. But immediately. 5 minutes later, her office door opened. Noah stepped inside and Evelyn realized this was the first time she'd seen him in full light. He'd cleaned up, shaved, found clothes that fit properly, combed his hair back. But more than the cosmetic changes, something in his bearing had shifted. He stood straighter, met her eyes directly, carried himself like someone who'd made a decision and intended to see it through. You came, Evelyn said, rising from her desk. I almost didn't. Noah glanced around the office, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art, furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. I spent 3 days convincing myself this was a mistake, that you were drunk on charity, that you'd see me in daylight and remember why people like me stay invisible. But you came anyway. I came anyway. He pulled her business card from his pocket, now worn at the edges. Because you asked the question no one else bothers to ask. What question? Noah smiled slightly, sadly. You asked if I was happy, not if I needed money, not if I wanted help. You asked about me. He paused. And because I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of being gravity. I'm tired of watching my life happen to someone else. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest, Something she hadn't realized was clenched tight. Okay. Okay? Okay, let's figure this out. Let's see what happens when someone takes a chance. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. Tell me what you know how to do. Noah sat slowly, his movements still careful. What I know how to do doesn't exist anymore. Try me. He took a breath. Data architecture. Systems integration. Back-end infrastructure for platforms that process millions of transactions. I specialized in finding inefficiencies in complex networks, in making systems communicate that weren't designed to talk to each other. He met her eyes. I was good at it, really good, before. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. Cross Dynamics had been struggling with exactly those issues. Legacy systems that didn't integrate cleanly with new acquisitions, data silos that made comprehensive analytics impossible, infrastructure that worked but barely. Before what? She asked quietly. Noah's expression closed. Before gravity. She wanted to push, to demand the full story, but she remembered their agreement. If Noah was going to share his past, it would be on his timeline, not hers. Can you still do it? She asked instead. The data architecture? I don't know. It's been years. Technology changes, I change. Maybe I'm too broken to be useful anymore. Or maybe you're exactly what I need. Evelyn leaned forward. Here's what I'm thinking. We start small. Contract work, project-based. I have a data integration nightmare that's been costing us millions in inefficiency. You take a look, see if you can find solutions. If it works, we talk about something permanent. If it doesn't, she paused. If it doesn't, you walk away with money in your pocket and a reference that might help somewhere else. Noah studied her, and she could see him calculating, looking for the angle, the trick, the place where this generous offer would reveal its sharp edges. What's the catch? He asked finally. No catch? Just conditions. You work from my offices. I need to know you have somewhere stable to be during the day. You meet with my tech team, and you treat them with respect even when they're wrong. And, she hesitated. And you let me help you find housing. Nothing fancy, just a place that's yours where you can sleep without watching your back. I don't take charity. This isn't charity. This is compensation structure. I can't have my contractors sleeping on sidewalks. It's bad for company image. She said it lightly, but watched his face carefully. Noah's mouth twitched. Company image. Absolutely critical. And if I fail, if I look at your systems and can't fix them, then we'll both know you tried. That's more than most people can say. The silence stretched. Through the window behind her, the city sprawled in the afternoon light. Thousands of buildings, millions of people, all of them fighting their own gravity in ways large and small. Okay, Noah said finally. I'll try. Evelyn felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose beyond quarterly earnings. Okay? But I need you to understand something. Noah's voice was serious now, stripped of irony. I'm not your redemption story. I'm not here to make you feel good about yourself. I'm here because I need to prove something to myself. If this works, it works for me first. Everything else is secondary. Fair enough. And if I figure out you're using me for some kind of publicity stunt, billionaire saves homeless man or whatever, I'm gone. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the apartment. I'll disappear so fast you'll wonder if I was ever real. Understood. They shook hands across the desk, his grip firm despite the tremor she felt beneath it, her own hand steady with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. What had she just committed to? What strange impulse had driven her to offer a stranger access to her company's most sensitive systems? Her board would lose their minds. Her legal team would draft so many liability waivers she'd need a separate meeting just to sign them all. But as Noah left her office, moving through her corporate palace with the careful posture of someone still learning to believe in his right to occupy space, Evelyn felt more certain of this decision than she'd felt about anything in years. Her assistant appeared in the doorway. Ms. Cross, your 2 o'clock is here, the meeting with venture capital about the Series D? Cancel it, Evelyn said, still staring at the door Noah had exited through. Cancel. Ms. Cross, this meeting's been scheduled for 6 weeks. Then they'll understand when I reschedule. Tell them something urgent came up. Should I tell them what? Evelyn smiled to herself, thinking about gray eyes and broken systems and chances that looked insane until they worked. Tell them I'm investing in infrastructure, long-term infrastructure, the kind that actually matters. Her assistant looked confused but retreated to make the calls. Evelyn turned back to her window, to the city that held millions of stories most people never bothered to read. Somewhere down there, Noah was walking out of her building into a world that had taught him to expect nothing. What must it feel like to be handed possibility after years of absence? To be offered a future when you'd learned to live in an eternal present? She didn't know, but she intended to find out. Her phone buzzed, a text from her daughter. "Mom, are you going to make it to my concert tomorrow? You promised." Miss Guilt stabbed through her. She'd forgotten. Again. The Symphony Youth Orchestra, the performance they'd been preparing for months. Another promise she'd made while distracted. Another commitment she'd let slip through the cracks of her schedule. She typed back, "I'll be there. Front row. I promise." This time, she meant it. Because if she could take a chance on a homeless man with gray eyes and a broken past, surely she could take a chance on being present in her own life. Surely she could risk being seen by the people who mattered most. The city hummed outside her window, indifferent, enormous, full of gravity. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn Cross felt like she might be learning to fly, or at least learning to fall in a different direction. The apartment Evelyn arranged wasn't much, a studio in a building that had seen better decades but still maintained its dignity. The landlord, a woman named Rosa who'd survived 3 recessions and 2 divorces, took one look at Noah and asked Evelyn point blank, "He in recovery?" "No," Evelyn said. "Running from the law?" "No." Rosa studied Noah with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read people's damage at a glance. "You got ghosts, though. I can see them." Noah met her stare without flinching. "Everyone has ghosts." "True enough." Rosa handed him a single key. "Rent's due on the 1st. You're late, you're out. You break things, you fix them. You cause trouble, you leave. We clear?" "We're clear." "Good. Welcome home." The word landed strange. Home. Noah turned it over in his mind as he climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, Evelyn following behind with the bag of basic supplies she'd insisted on buying. Sheets, towels, soap, coffee. The essentials of a life he'd forgotten how to live. The studio was small but clean. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. A bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. A window that looked out at a brick wall 10 feet away. It was nothing. It was everything. "It's perfect," Noah said quietly. Evelyn set the bag on the counter that divided the kitchen from the rest of the space. "I know it's not. It's perfect," he repeated more firmly this time. "I have walls. I have a door that locks. I have a bed that's mine." He touched the window frame like he needed to confirm it was real. "I haven't had that in 4 years." 4 years. The number hung between them, carrying weight neither of them wanted to examine yet. Evelyn's phone buzzed, her assistant, no doubt, with the 17 things that needed her attention immediately. She silenced it without looking. "I should go. Let you settle in. Your first day is Monday, 9 a.m. Security will have your temporary badge ready." "Evelyn." Noah turned from the window. "Why are you doing this?" She'd been asked that question in various forms for the past week, by her assistant, by her legal counsel, by her own conscience at 3 in the morning when sleep wouldn't come. But standing in this small studio watching a man touch walls like they were miracles, she finally had an answer. "Because I built an empire, and I forgot what any of it was for. Because success stopped meaning anything except more success. Because..." She paused, searching for honesty. "Because my daughter asked me last month what I actually believed in, and I couldn't answer. Not really. I could talk about market share and innovation and disruption, but I couldn't name a single thing I'd done that mattered beyond quarterly reports. And I'm supposed to be that thing? The thing that matters? No, you're supposed to be a person who deserves a chance. Everything else is just me trying to remember what it feels like to be human instead of a headline." Noah absorbed this, his expression unreadable. That's more honest than I expected. I'm tired of the lies we tell to make charity feel like strategy. This isn't charity. This is investment. In what? I'm not entirely sure yet, but investment nonetheless. She moved toward the door, then paused. Get some rest. Eat something. Monday comes faster than you think. After she left, Noah stood in the center of his new studio apartment and tried to remember how to breathe normally. The walls felt too close and too far away simultaneously. The silence pressed against his ears like water. He'd grown accustomed to the sounds of the street, traffic, voices, the ambient noise of a city that never slept. This quiet felt alien, almost aggressive. He unpacked the supplies Evelyn had bought methodically, giving his hands something to do while his mind tried to catch up with his circumstances. Sheets on the bed, a real bed, not cardboard or concrete, towels hung in the bathroom, soap by the sink, coffee in the cabinet, small things, normal things. The building blocks of a life he dismantled piece by piece until nothing remained but motion and forgetting. His reflection caught him by surprise in the bathroom mirror. He looked different already. Cleaner, yes, but more than that. Something in his eyes had changed. The resignation that had lived there for years showed cracks, light bleeding through from somewhere he'd thought was permanently dark. He thought about calling his sister. She'd want to know he was alive, that he'd found something resembling shelter. But the phone felt impossible. What would he say? How could he explain 4 years of silence with a casual, "I'm okay now"? Instead, he made coffee. The ritual of it, measuring grounds, pouring water, waiting for the machine to hiss and drip, felt almost sacred. He took the cup to the window and watched the brick wall across the narrow alley, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he let himself consider the possibility that tomorrow might be different from today. Monday arrived with rain, the kind of cold autumn rain that made the city feel gray and tired. Noah dressed in the clothes Evelyn had arranged to be delivered, simple, professional, nothing flashy. The shirt felt strange against his skin, too clean, too crisp. He'd grown used to fabric that carried the city's grime like a second texture. The Cross Dynamics building rose 40 stories in the financial district, all glass and steel, and the kind of architectural confidence that came from knowing you'd changed the world. Noah stood on the sidewalk across the street for 10 minutes, watching people flow in and out, all of them moving with purpose, all of them belonging to something he'd abandoned years ago. A hand touched his shoulder. He flinched before he could stop himself. "Sorry," Evelyn said, holding up her hands. "Didn't mean to startle you. I saw you from my office." Noah gestured at the building. "I was just getting your courage up. I know. I do the same thing before board meetings." She fell into step beside him as they crossed the street. "Difference is, I'm usually afraid they'll fire me. You're afraid of something else." "What am I afraid of?" "That you'll walk in there and discover you're not who you used to be, that the skills are gone, that the person you were died somewhere on a street corner, and this is just a ghost pretending to be alive." Noah stopped walking. Evelyn's assessment was so precise it felt like surgery, clean, necessary, painful. "Am I wrong?" she asked gently. "No, you're not wrong." "Good. Fear means you care, means this matters." She started walking again. "Come on, let's find out together." The lobby was all marble and minimalist art, the kind of space designed to intimidate. Security waved them through, and Evelyn led him to the elevators that opened into the executive floors. "You're putting me on your floor?" Noah asked as the elevator climbed. "Where else would I put you? You're working on our core infrastructure. That requires access to everything." She glanced at him. "Unless you'd prefer a cubicle farm on level 3 with the interns?" "Your board is going to love this." "My board reports to me. They'll get used to it." The executive floor was quieter than Noah expected. Thick carpet, glass-walled offices, the hushed efficiency of people who moved billions of dollars with keystrokes. Evelyn led him past curious stares and whispered conversations to a corner office that looked out over the city. "This is yours," she said, opening the door. Noah stared. The office was easily as large as his entire apartment. A desk, a conference table, monitors already set up, shelves waiting for books or personal items he didn't have. "This is insane," he said. "This is practical. You'll need space for the team meetings and the monitors for data visualization. Evelyn leaned against the door frame. Plus, I want people to see you here. Want them to understand you're not a project or charity case. You're a contractor working on critical infrastructure. The office helps establish that. Or it makes me a target for resentment. Probably that too. But you didn't survive 4 years on the street by being fragile. I think you can handle some corporate gossip. A woman appeared in the hallway. Mid-30s, sharp suit, expression that suggested she suffered fools poorly, and not at all. Ms. Cross, the engineering team is ready when you are. Thank you, Sarah. Evelyn turned to Noah. Ready to meet the people whose lives you're about to make difficult? Not remotely. Perfect. That's exactly the right attitude. The conference room held 8 people, 6 men, 2 women, all of them radiating the particular confidence that came from being very good at very difficult things. They stood when Evelyn entered, their eyes immediately fixing on Noah with curiosity and barely concealed skepticism. Everyone, this is Noah Reed. Noah, this is my engineering leadership team. They're brilliant, they're overworked, and they're about to become your best friends. Evelyn gestured to chairs. Sit. Let's talk about why we're all here. Sarah, apparently the VP of Engineering, pulled up a series of diagrams on the screen. Our current infrastructure is a Frankenstein's monster. We've acquired 7 companies in the last 3 years, and each one came with its own systems, its own data architecture, its own way of doing things. We've been trying to integrate them into a unified platform, but it's a disaster, one of the men interrupted. He was younger than the others, with the kind of intensity that suggested he'd been fighting this problem personally. We have data silos that don't communicate, APIs that break when you look at them wrong, legacy systems that would cost millions to replace but cost millions in inefficiency to maintain. It's a nightmare. Noah studied the diagrams, and something in his brain that had been dormant for years began to wake. He saw the problems immediately, not just the obvious integration failures, but the deeper architectural issues, the places where foundational decisions made years ago had created cascading complications. May I? He gestured to the screen. Sarah handed him the control tablet without a word. Noah pulled up a different view, drilling down into the data flow patterns. The room fell silent as he navigated through layers of complexity with the ease of someone reading a familiar book. Here, he said finally, highlighting a section. This is your core problem. You're trying to integrate at the application layer, but your data models are fundamentally incompatible. You're translating between languages that don't share grammar. Every transaction requires multiple conversions, and each conversion introduces latency and error potential. We know that, the intense young man said, but we can't rebuild the entire data model. The cost would be, you don't rebuild it. You create a new abstraction layer, a metamodel that sits above the existing systems and provides a unified interface. Let the legacy systems keep their native data models, but standardize how they communicate with the abstraction layer. Noah was drawing on the screen now, his hands moving with confidence he hadn't felt in years. You're not forcing them to speak the same language. You're giving them a universal translator. Sarah leaned forward, her skepticism shifting to attention. That's been proposed before. The computational overhead would be massive. Only if you implement it traditionally. But if you distribute the abstraction layer, make it parallel rather than hierarchical, you can process translations at scale without creating bottlenecks. He pulled up a new diagram, sketching the architecture in real time. You're thinking of this as a hub-and-spoke model. Think of it instead as a mesh network. Every node can communicate with every other node through the abstraction layer, but the translation happens locally, distributed across your infrastructure. The room had gone completely silent. Noah looked up and found 8 pairs of eyes staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to something that looked like hope. That could work, Sarah said slowly. That could actually work. It would require complete mapping of your current data flows, Noah continued, warming to the problem in a way he hadn't anticipated. And you'd need to build the abstraction layer carefully, make sure it's flexible enough to accommodate future acquisitions without requiring complete redesign. But yes, it could work. More than that, it could solve problems you haven't encountered yet. How long would it take? Evelyn asked from her position by the door. Noah considered. To map everything? 6 to 8 weeks? Assuming I have access to all your systems and cooperation from every team, To build the abstraction layer? Another 12 to 16 weeks, depending on complexity. 6 months, the young, intense man said. We've been banging our heads against this for 2 years. You've been trying to solve it by fighting the existing architecture. I'm proposing we work with it instead. Noah set down the tablet, suddenly aware that his heart was racing, that his hands were shaking slightly, that something in him had come alive that he'd thought was permanently dead. But I could be wrong. I haven't done this in years. Maybe I'm missing something obvious. You're not, Sarah said firmly. She turned to Evelyn. Where did you find him? He found me, Evelyn said. Or we found each other. The details are complicated. Sarah looked at Noah with new respect. Can you start today? Noah glanced at Evelyn, who nodded slightly. Yes, I can start today. Good, because we've wasted enough time on approaches that don't work. Sarah stood, and the rest of the team followed. Welcome to the nightmare, Noah. I hope you're ready to live in data models and API documentation for the next several months. I used to dream in data models, Noah said quietly. I think I remember how. The team filed out, already discussing implementation strategies in language that would sound like gibberish to anyone outside the field. Sarah paused at the door. For what it's worth, that was impressive. Really impressive. I don't know where you've been or what your story is, but that... She gestured to the diagram still displayed on the screen. That's the work of someone who understands systems at a fundamental level. Don't waste it. After she left, Noah found himself alone with Evelyn in the conference room. The silence felt heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Did that just happen? Noah asked finally. That just happened. Evelyn smiled. How do you feel? Terrified. Exhilarated. Like I'm about to wake up on a sidewalk and discover this was all a dream. He sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. I knew the concepts, the theory, but actually applying them, actually thinking at that level again, I didn't know if I could. But you did. I did. He looked at her directly. Thank you for this, for the chance, for seeing something in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. Don't thank me yet. You just committed to 6 months of the most complicated technical work this company has ever attempted. If it fails, I'll have failed trying. That's more than I've done in 4 years. He stood, moving to the window that looked out over the city. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you always make decisions this way, based on instinct and dinner conversation? Evelyn considered the question. No. Usually I have 6 analyses, 4 consultants, and 3 board meetings before committing to anything. This, is the first truly impulsive thing I've done since I started this company. How does it feel? Honestly, like I'm finally doing something real. She joined him at the window. I've spent a decade building something that's supposed to matter, making technology that's supposed to change the world. But most days, it just feels like moving money from one column to another. This, watching you light up, talking about data architecture, seeing my team look at someone with actual hope, this feels like it might actually mean something. Or I might fail spectacularly and prove that charity isn't the same as capability. Maybe, but I don't think so. Evelyn checked her phone, meetings stacking up, decisions requiring her attention. I have to go. Board meeting that's going to be deeply unpleasant. But you have everything you need? I have more than I need. I have possibility. His voice caught. That's more than enough. After Evelyn left, Noah returned to his new office and sat at the desk that was his, in the building where he belonged, doing work that mattered. His hands were still shaking. His chest felt tight with emotions he'd spent years learning to suppress. But beneath the fear and the disbelief, something else was growing, something that felt dangerously like hope. He pulled up the system architecture diagrams on his monitors and lost himself in the beautiful complexity of data flows and integration patterns. And for the first time in 4 years, Noah Reed felt like he existed in more than just the present tense. He felt like he might have a future. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of code, diagrams, and endless meetings. Noah threw himself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. He arrived before dawn and left long after dark, mapping data flows with the obsessive detail of someone trying to prove his existence through productivity. The engineering team's initial skepticism evolved into respect, then something approaching awe. Noah didn't just understand the systems, he saw through them, identifying problems they hadn't realized existed and solutions they'd never considered. But the work took its toll. Noah's sleep became irregular, fragmented by dreams that felt more like memories trying to surface. Some mornings, he woke in his studio apartment confused about where he was, his body still expecting concrete and cold. The transition from street to office wasn't just practical, it was psychological, emotional, a daily reconstruction of an identity he deliberately destroyed. 3 weeks in, Sarah found him in his office at 2 a.m, surrounded by printouts and half-empty coffee cups. "You're going to burn out," she said from the doorway. Noah looked up, his eyes red from screen strain. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running at a pace that's unsustainable." She came in and sat across from his desk. "Look, I don't know your story. Evelyn doesn't gossip, and everyone's too professional to ask directly. But I recognize the signs. You're working like someone who's afraid if they stop, everything will disappear." "Maybe I am." "Noah," Sarah's voice was gentle but firm, "the work will be here tomorrow. The systems aren't going anywhere. You need to rest." "I need to prove I deserve to be here." "You've already proven that. That presentation you gave to the executive team last week, the distributed abstraction layer architecture, that was brilliant, game-changing. You've already earned your place." She paused. "So what are you really afraid of?" Noah set down his pen, his hands trembling with exhaustion and something deeper. "That I'll wake up and remember why I ended up on that street corner in the first place. That whatever broke me before will break me again, and this time I won't be able to pretend I was just unlucky." "What did break you before?" The question hung in the air. Noah had been waiting for someone to ask directly, dreading it and needing it simultaneously. "I had a family," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "A wife, 2 daughters, 7 and 9 years old. We were driving home from a vacation. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, hit us head on. He stopped, his throat closing. I was driving. I survived. They didn't." Sarah's expression shifted from curiosity to horror, to profound sadness. "Noah, I couldn't stay in the life we'd built. Everything reminded me of them, the house, the neighborhood, my job. Every morning I woke up and forgot for 3 seconds that they were gone, and then I'd remember, and it felt like dying, so I started leaving. First the house, then the job, then the city. I kept leaving until there was nothing left to leave. And then I was just gone. Not dead, but not alive, just existing in the spaces between. I'm so sorry." Everyone was sorry. That's all anyone could say. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Like the word meant anything. Like it could fill the hole where my family used to be. Noah looked at his hands, still seeing phantom blood that soap could never wash away. "It's been 4 years. I should be better. I should have processed the grief, found closure, moved on. That's what people expect. But some holes don't fill. Some ghosts don't leave." "Is that why you're working yourself to death? Trying to outrun them?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to prove I can still be someone worth saving. That Evelyn didn't waste her instinct on a broken man who can't be fixed." Sarah stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city lights that never slept. "Can I tell you something? When Evelyn hired me 5 years ago, I was coming out of a divorce that destroyed me. I'd lost custody of my son, lost my house, lost everything I'd built. I was functional but barely, empty in ways that had nothing to do with bank accounts. I didn't know that. Most people don't, but Evelyn saw something in me beyond the damage, gave me responsibility I didn't think I could handle. And you know what saved me? Not the work, not the success. It was realizing that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. That you can build something meaningful from the pieces of who you used to be." Noah absorbed this, feeling something shift in his chest. "Does it get easier, the ghosts?" "No, but you get stronger. The weight stays the same, but you build muscle carrying it." She turned from the window. "Go home, Noah. Get some real sleep. The systems will still need fixing tomorrow." After she left, Noah sat alone in his office, Sarah's words echoing in the silence. He thought about his daughters. Emma, who'd loved dinosaurs with an intensity that made her teachers laugh, and Sophie, who'd insisted on wearing tutus everywhere, including the grocery store. He thought about his wife, Catherine, who'd made him laugh even in the deepest stress of startup chaos. He thought about the life he'd built and then abandoned because living in it felt like drowning. But sitting in this office, doing work that mattered, slowly rebuilding an identity from fragments, maybe Sarah was right. Maybe broken wasn't the same as worthless. He shut down his monitors, gathered his things, and went home to the studio apartment that still felt too quiet, but was slowly becoming familiar. And for the first time in 4 years, Noah Reed allowed himself to consider the possibility that he might deserve the second chance he'd been given. That possibility felt dangerous, revolutionary, absolutely terrifying. But it also felt like the first honest thing he'd let himself feel since the accident that had stolen everything. The next morning, Evelyn found him in the cafeteria at 8 a.m., eating breakfast like a normal person instead of mainlining coffee at his desk. "Sarah talked to you," she said, sitting down across from him. "She did." "I'm glad. You were scaring the junior developers. They thought you might be some kind of work cyborg." Noah smiled despite himself. "Just a regular cyborg." "Regular cyborgs take breaks." Evelyn sipped her tea. "You told her about your family." It wasn't a question. Noah nodded. "She told you?" "She was worried, wanted me to know the context." Evelyn met his eyes. "I'm sorry, Noah, I can't imagine." "Please don't." "Don't what?" "Don't change how you see me. Don't start treating me like I'm fragile. I get enough of that from my own brain. I need at least one place where I'm just a person doing a job, not a tragedy with technical skills." Evelyn considered this carefully. "Okay, but you have to promise me something in return." "What?" "That you'll tell me if it becomes too much. If the work, the environment, the pressure, if it starts pulling you back to the place you were before. Because I didn't give you this opportunity so you could destroy yourself rebuilding my infrastructure. Why did you give me this opportunity? Honestly, I still don't entirely know. Instinct, impulse, the feeling that we were both looking for something we couldn't name." She paused. "But I know what it's become. It's become watching someone remember how to be alive, and that's worth more than any system architecture." Noah felt his throat tighten. "I don't know how to respond to that." "You don't have to. Just keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep letting yourself believe you deserve to be here." She stood. "And come to my daughter's winter concert next week. She's been asking about the interesting man who works in the corner office." "She knows about me?" "She knows I took a chance on someone, and it's working. She wants to meet the person who made her mother remember why any of this matters." Evelyn smiled. "Plus, she plays violin, and apparently you used to play piano. She has questions about music theory that I'm completely unequipped to answer." After Evelyn left, Noah sat in the cafeteria finishing his breakfast, surrounded by cross-dynamics employees starting their days with the casual comfort of people who belonged. And slowly, carefully, Noah began to let himself believe that he might belong here too. Not as a charity case, not as a project, but as someone whose brokenness didn't disqualify him from meaning. It was a small belief, fragile as new ice, but it was a beginning. The concert hall was smaller than Noah expected, tucked into a community center that served double duty as rehearsal space and performance venue. Parents filled the seats with the particular mixture of pride and anxiety that came from watching children attempt art in public. Noah stood in the back, uncertain whether he actually belonged here, when Evelyn appeared at his elbow. "You came," she said, genuine surprise in her voice. "You invited me. Would have been rude not to." "Half my executive team doesn't show up when I invite them to things." She gestured toward 2 empty seats in the 3rd row. "Come on, Maya's been looking for you." They settled into their seats just as the lights dimmed. The youth orchestra filed onto the small stage, teenagers in black and white, carrying instruments with the careful reverence of people holding things more valuable than their price tags. Maya Cross was easy to spot. Her mother's sharp features softened by youth, dark hair pulled back, violin tucked under her chin with professional precision. The conductor raised her baton and the music began. Noah hadn't heard live classical music in years. The last time had been a concert Catherine had insisted they attend, dragging him away from work deadlines to sit in an auditorium and remember that beauty existed outside of code. His daughters had fallen asleep in their seats, and he and Catherine had held hands in the darkness, and everything had been perfect in the way moments are perfect before you know they're about to end. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the armrests, forcing himself to breathe, to stay present, to not flee from the emotions rising in his chest like floodwater. Evelyn's hand touched his arm briefly, a question, an offer of escape if he needed it. He shook his head slightly. He would stay. He would let himself feel this. Maya played with intensity that surprised him. This wasn't a child going through motions. This was someone who understood music as language, as communication, as a way of saying things words couldn't touch. During a particularly complex passage, her concentration was absolute, her bow moving with precision that spoke of hundreds of practice hours. When the concert ended, the applause was genuine and warm. Parents stood, some wiping tears, all of them proud of children who'd created something beautiful in a world that often felt determined to be ugly. Backstage, Maya found them immediately. She was still flushed from performance adrenaline, her violin case clutched in one hand. "You actually came," she said to her mother, and Noah heard the surprise beneath the words. This was not a reliable occurrence. "I promised I would." Evelyn pulled her daughter into a hug. "You were incredible. That second movement, when did you get that good?" "Practice." "Which you'd know if you were ever home to hear it." The words had bite, but Maya softened them with a smile. Then she turned to Noah. "You're the homeless guy." "Maya," Evelyn said sharply. "What?" "That's what you said. That you met a homeless man who was really smart, and now he works for you." Maya studied Noah with the directness of teenagers who hadn't learned to hide their curiosity. "Mom says you used to play piano." Noah felt exposed under her examination. "A long time ago, not very well." "She says you can sight-read complex compositions." "Your mother is generous with her assessments." "My mother doesn't lie about skills, she's ruthless about competence." Maya shifted her violin case. "There's a piano in the practice room. Can you play something?" "Maya, Noah doesn't have to perform for you," Evelyn said. "I'm not asking him to perform. I'm asking if he can play. There's a difference." Maya looked at Noah expectantly. "Unless you can't anymore." Which would be understandable. Skills atrophy. The challenge was clear. Noah could decline, retreat, maintain the careful boundaries he'd built between his past and present. Or he could do something terrifying and trust that the person he used to be might still exist in muscle memory and pattern recognition. "Show me the piano," he said. The practice room was small and cluttered with music stands and instrument cases. The piano was an upright, probably 40 years old, maintained with the care of an institution that couldn't afford replacement but refused to let standards slip. Noah sat on the bench, his hands hovering over the keys like a prayer. "What do you want to hear?" he asked. "Whatever you remember," Maya said, settling against the wall with her arms crossed. Noah's fingers touched the keys, and suddenly he was back in the living room of the house he'd shared with Catherine, playing while his daughters did homework at the dining table. The piece came to him without conscious thought. Debussy, Clair de Lune, something he'd played 1,000 times until it lived in his bones rather than his memory. The first notes were hesitant, uncertain. His fingers stumbled over passages that had once been automatic. But slowly, incrementally, the music remembered itself. The patterns reasserted. His hands found their way through the composition like travelers recognizing a path they'd walked in darkness. He played the entire piece without stopping, without thinking, letting the music carry him through the territories of grief and loss into something that felt almost like peace. When the final notes faded, he realized his face was wet. Maya stood frozen against the wall, her expression unreadable. Evelyn had appeared in the doorway at some point, watching with an intensity that made Noah look away. "You said you weren't very good," Maya said finally, her voice strange. "I'm not. That was sloppy. Lots of mistakes. That was beautiful. That was—" She stopped, searching for words. "That was someone who understands what music is supposed to do." "What's it supposed to do?" Noah asked, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Make you feel things you've been avoiding." Maya picked up her violin case. My teacher says technique doesn't matter if you can't access the emotion behind the notes, that all the perfect performances in the world don't equal one moment of actual feeling. She looked at him directly. You have that. The feeling part. The feeling part is what broke me. Maybe. But it's also what makes you real. She glanced at her mother, then back at Noah. I'm glad Mom found you. She needed to remember that business isn't the only thing that matters. After Maya left to join her friends, Noah and Evelyn stood in the practice room surrounded by the ghost of music. I'm sorry, Noah said. I didn't mean to make that heavy. Don't apologize. That was... Evelyn paused, choosing words carefully. That was watching someone remember they're human. That's never something to apologize for. Your daughter is intense. She gets it from me. The intensity, the directness, the inability to pretend things don't matter when they clearly do. Evelyn sat on the piano bench beside him. She's right, though. I did need to remember. I've spent so long building this company, chasing success, that I forgot why any of it was supposed to matter. And then I met you, and suddenly I had to confront the fact that I'd let everything real become secondary to everything strategic. I'm not your redemption, remember? We agreed on that. You're not my redemption. You're my reminder. There's a difference. She touched the piano keys lightly, not making sound, just feeling the texture. Can I ask you something personal? More personal than what I've already shared? Would you play something at the company holiday party next month? Nothing formal. Just the way you played just now. Real. Noah felt panic rising. Evelyn, I can't. That was private. That was just muscle memory and grief. I can't perform. I'm not asking you to perform. I'm asking you to share. To let 300 people see what Maya and I just saw, that brilliance and brokenness can exist in the same person, and neither one negates the other. She stood, giving him space. Think about it. No pressure. But I think it might matter, not just to them, to you. Over the next 3 weeks, Noah's abstraction layer architecture moved from theoretical framework to practical implementation. The engineering team worked in coordinated sprints, building components that would eventually integrate into a unified system. Noah found himself in constant meetings, explaining concepts, answering questions, solving problems that arose when theory encountered reality. But he also found himself thinking about the piano, about music, about the way his hands had remembered patterns his brain had tried to forget. He started staying late in the office not to work, but to use the piano in the executive lounge, a grand piano that sat mostly decorative in a corner where executives occasionally hosted clients. Sarah found him there one evening, playing Chopin with his eyes closed. I didn't know this building came with a soundtrack, she said, settling into a nearby chair. Noah's hand stilled on the keys. Sorry, I should have asked permission. Don't stop, that was gorgeous. She gestured for him to continue. How long have you been doing this? Playing, since I was 8. Playing here? About a week. Noah resumed the piece, softer now, aware of his audience. It's strange, I thought I'd forgotten. But the music was just waiting, like it never left. Muscle memory is powerful. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Sarah listened for a moment. Evelyn asked you to play at the holiday party? She did. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's a terrible idea. Why terrible? Noah's hands moved through a difficult passage, finding their way through complexity by instinct. Because playing in front of people requires vulnerability I'm not sure I can afford. Because every time I play, I remember my family. Because I'm afraid if I let people see that much of me, they'll realize how damaged I actually am. Noah. Sarah waited until he looked at her. Everyone here already knows you're damaged. We've all figured out something broke you before you got here. But you know what? Everyone in this company is damaged in some way. Evelyn's damaged by a divorce that destroyed her faith in partnership. I'm damaged by losing my son. Marcus in accounting is damaged by parents who never believed he was good enough. We're all walking around with holes in ourselves, pretending to be whole. Then why would they want to see more damage? Because damage isn't the same as weakness, and watching someone transform their brokenness into something beautiful, that gives the rest of us permission to try. She stood to leave. Do it or don't. But don't hide because you think being broken disqualifies you from being seen. The night of the holiday party arrived with the kind of cold December rain that made the city feel small and close. Noah dressed carefully. The suit Evelyn had insisted on buying him, the shirt that still felt too formal, the shoes that hadn't yet molded to his feet. He looked in his bathroom mirror and saw someone who almost passed for normal. Almost. The party filled Cross Dynamics' main event space. 300 employees, plus partners and guests, all of them celebrating a year of success and survival in an industry that ate companies whole. Evelyn worked the room with practiced ease, but Noah saw the exhaustion behind her smile, the weight of performing leadership for people who needed to believe their CEO was invincible. He stayed near the edges, nursing a drink he wasn't actually consuming, watching people interact with the fascination of an anthropologist studying familiar rituals from outside. Several people recognized him, nodded, smiled. A few came over to talk shop about the integration project. But mostly he remained invisible, which suited him fine. Until Evelyn found him hiding behind a decorative plant. "You came," she said. "I came. Not sure why, but I came. Because you're part of this now, part of the company, part of the team, part of something bigger than surviving day to day." She glanced at the grand piano positioned on the small stage where a jazz trio had been playing earlier. "They're taking a break. The piano is available." Noah's chest tightened. "I don't think I can do this." "Then don't. But if you can let these people see what Maya and I saw, it might change things. Not for them, for you." She walked away before he could argue, leaving him alone with his fear and the piano that waited like a challenge. Noah stood there for 5 full minutes, watching people laugh and drink and celebrate, all of them more whole than he felt, all of them belonging in ways he'd forgotten how to access. He could leave, walk out, return to his apartment and his comfortable isolation. No one would blame him, no one would even notice, but Maya's words echoed in his memory. "The feeling part is what makes you real." He walked to the piano before he could reconsider. The room didn't quiet immediately. People kept talking, drinking, celebrating. Noah sat at the bench and placed his hands on the keys, and suddenly he wasn't in a corporate event space anymore. He was in his living room playing for Catherine while she cooked dinner. He was at his daughter's recital, accompanying their school choir. He was in every moment music had been the language his family spoke when words weren't enough. He began to play. The piece was one he'd written himself years ago, never performed, just something he'd composed during a particularly difficult project deadline when the only way to process stress was to transform it into music. It was melancholic, complex, filled with passages that required technical skill and emotional honesty in equal measure. Slowly, the room began to quiet. Conversations paused mid-sentence. People turned toward the stage. By the time Noah reached the second movement, the entire space had fallen silent. 300 people arrested by music that spoke of loss and survival and the terrible beauty of continuing to exist when everything you loved was gone. Noah played with his eyes closed, tears streaming down his face, his hands moving through patterns that hurt and healed simultaneously. He played for Catherine and Emma and Sophie. He played for the 4 years he'd spent invisible on street corners. He played for Evelyn, who'd seen something in him worth saving. He played for himself, for the person he'd been, the person he'd become, and the person he might still manage to be. When the final notes faded, the silence was absolute. Then someone started clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause that felt like more than appreciation. It felt like recognition, like 300 people simultaneously acknowledging that brokenness didn't disqualify beauty, that survival could be its own form of courage. Noah opened his eyes, disoriented, returning to himself in the corporate space that had momentarily transformed into something sacred. Evelyn stood in the front row, tears on her face, applauding with an intensity that suggested she understood exactly what had just happened. He stood on shaking legs and made his way off the stage, people parting to let him through, several reaching out to touch his shoulder, to offer quiet acknowledgement. He found a corner and tried to remember how to breathe. Sarah appeared beside him. "You okay?" I don't know what I am." "You're someone who just reminded 300 people that we're all human underneath the job titles and performance metrics. She handed him a glass of water. That was brave, impossibly brave. It felt like dying. The best things usually do. Evelyn found him an hour later, after the party had resumed its normal rhythm and people had returned to celebration. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him in his corner, two people who'd somehow found each other in a world designed to keep everyone separate. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For trusting me, for trusting yourself, for showing my entire company what it looks like when someone chooses to be real instead of safe." She paused. "And for reminding me why I started this company in the first place. Not to make money, not to build an empire, to create something that mattered, to make space for people to be excellent without having to pretend they're perfect. I'm not excellent, I'm broken. You're both, we're all both." Evelyn looked at him directly. "The abstraction layer is working, by the way. Sarah showed me the preliminary results. Your architecture is solving problems we didn't even know we had. You're saving this company millions, maybe tens of millions, in operational efficiency. That's just technical work. No, that's you taking your brokenness, your ability to see systems because you understand how things fall apart, and transforming it into something that holds other things together. That's alchemy. That's what healing looks like." Noah felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd kept locked and frozen for 4 years. "I miss them," he whispered. "Every single day, I miss them so much I can barely breathe." "I know." Playing that music, it was like they were here. Like for 5 minutes, I got to be the person they knew. The father, the husband, the man who had a life that meant something beyond survival. You still are that person. You've always been that person. You just forgot how to see it. How do you know? Evelyn smiled sadly. Because I forgot too. I forgot I was a mother who mattered more than a CEO who succeeds. I forgot my daughter needed me present more than she needed me powerful. You didn't just remind me, you showed me what's possible when we stop performing and start existing. They stood together in the corner of the event space, watching people celebrate, both of them understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Noah had stopped being a project and become a person. Evelyn had stopped being an untouchable executive and remembered she was human. The music Noah had played still echoed in the room's acoustic memory, a reminder that beauty and grief could coexist, that survival was its own form of triumph, that being seen didn't always mean being destroyed. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Noah pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He called his sister. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Hello?" "Rachel, it's Noah." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Noah? Noah, is that really you?" "It's really me. Where are you? Are you okay? God, Noah, I've been looking for you for years. The police said you just disappeared. I thought maybe you'd..." "I didn't. I left. I couldn't stay in that life, so I left everything." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I disappeared." "Where are you?" Rachel asked again, her voice steadier now, shifting into the protective older sister mode he remembered. "I'm in the city. I have an apartment. I have a job. He paused, searching for honesty. "I'm not okay, but I'm trying to be." "Can I see you?" The question terrified him. Seeing Rachel meant confronting the family he'd abandoned, the life he'd walked away from, the person he'd been before grief rewrote everything. But it also meant choosing to be visible, choosing to exist in relationship rather than isolation, choosing to believe he deserved connection despite everything. "Yes," Noah said. "Yes, you can see me." They made plans for coffee the following weekend. After they hung up, Noah sat in his apartment feeling the weight and lightness of having been seen by 300 coworkers, by a woman who'd taken a chance, by a teenage girl who'd called him real, and now by a sister who'd never stopped looking. Being visible was terrifying, but it was also, he was learning, the only way to actually be alive. The coffee shop Rachel chose was neutral territory. Not the neighborhood where Noah's family had lived, not anywhere that carried the weight of specific memory, just a quiet place with good light and enough distance from both their pasts that meeting felt possible. Noah arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time watching the door like it might produce something dangerous. When Rachel walked in, He almost didn't recognize her. She'd aged in the 4 years since he'd seen her, new lines around her eyes, gray threading through her dark hair. But more than that, she carried herself differently. Harder, more guarded, the way people looked when they'd spent too long bracing for bad news. Her eyes found him immediately. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Rachel crossed the space between them and pulled him into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. "You idiot," she whispered into his shoulder. "You complete idiot." "I know." 4 years, Noah. 4 years of not knowing if you were alive or dead. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? "I'm sorry." She pulled back, holding him at arm's length, her eyes searching his face like she was cataloging damage. "You look different, older, thinner, like you've been somewhere I can't imagine." "I have been." They sat at a corner table, coffee between them, the conversation starting and stopping like an engine that couldn't quite turn over. Rachel told him about her life, her kids growing up, her husband's promotion, the house they'd bought in the suburbs. Normal things, safe things, everything Noah had walked away from. "Why didn't you call?" she asked finally, cutting through the small talk. "Even just to let me know you were alive?" Noah stared into his coffee, searching for words that could explain the inexplicable. "Because I couldn't figure out how to be alive and dead at the same time. Every conversation would have required me to pretend I was okay, and I wasn't okay. I was so far from okay that pretending felt impossible. You could have told me that. I would have understood. No, you wouldn't have. You would have tried to fix me. You would have insisted I see therapists, take medication, move in with you and Dan. You would have made me into a project, and I couldn't be someone's project. I needed to disappear completely or not exist at all." Rachel's jaw tightened. "So you chose to hurt everyone who loved you instead of letting us help?" "Yes. I chose that. It was selfish and cruel, and I did it anyway because the alternative was drowning in front of you while you watched helplessly." Noah met her eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just trying to explain what happened." "What did happen? Where have you been?" So Noah told her. Not everything. Some experiences didn't translate into words, but enough. The street corners, the invisibility, the 4 years of existing in the margins of a world that had decided he didn't matter. He told her about Evelyn, about the impossible dinner invitation, about the job that had seemed like charity until it became something else entirely. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through disbelief, horror, anger, and finally something that looked like reluctant understanding. "You were homeless," she said when he finished. "My brother was homeless for 4 years and I had no idea. I made sure you had no idea. And this woman, Evelyn, she just offered you a job? Based on dinner conversation? Based on instinct? Based on seeing something in me I'd stopped seeing in myself?" Noah paused. "She saved my life. Not dramatically, just by treating me like I was worth saving." "I would have treated you like you were worth saving." "No, you would have treated me like I was broken and needed fixing. There's a difference." Noah reached across the table, touching his sister's hand. "Evelyn treated me like I was whole, despite being broken. Like the damage didn't define everything. That's not something you could have done. You knew me before. You would always be comparing me to who I used to be." Rachel pulled her hand back, her eyes wet. "Do you have any idea how much it hurt? Losing Catherine and the girls was devastating, but then losing you too, watching you disappear while you were still breathing, that was its own kind of death. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry I put you through that. Sorry doesn't fix 4 years. No, but it's all I have." They sat in painful silence, the distance between them measured in grief and abandonment and the impossibility of going backward. "Tell me about them," Rachel said finally. "Tell me about Emma and Sophie." Noah felt his chest constrict. "Rachel, please, I need to hear you say their names. I need to know you haven't forgotten them." "I could never forget them. They're in everything, every piece of music I play, every line of code I write, every moment I manage to exist." Noah's voice broke. Emma wanted to be a paleontologist. She had this encyclopedic knowledge of dinosaurs that made adults look stupid. And Sophie believed in magic, real magic. She thought if she tried hard enough, she could make flowers bloom by talking to them. She got that from you, that belief in impossible things. And look where it got me. It got you here, alive, trying. That's not nothing. Rachel wiped her eyes. They would have wanted you to survive. Catherine would have wanted you to survive. Catherine would have been furious that I spent 4 years on street corners reading philosophy instead of living. Probably. She didn't tolerate self-pity. Rachel managed a small smile. But she also loved you enough to forgive even that. They talked for another hour, rebuilding connections slowly, carefully, like constructing something from broken pieces that didn't quite fit together anymore. Rachel told him about the memorial service they'd held, the scholarship fund established in Emma and Sophie's names, the ways the family had tried to honor their memory. You weren't there, she said, at the service. We waited, hoping you'd show up, but you never did. I couldn't. Being there would have made it real in a way I wasn't ready to accept. And now? Is it real now? Noah considered the question honestly. It's real. It's been real for a while. I just had to learn how to live with reality instead of hiding from it. Before they left, Rachel made him promise to stay in touch. Weekly calls, monthly visits, no more disappearing. And I want to meet her, Rachel added. This Evelyn woman who saw something worth saving. She's my boss. It's professional. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Nothing about what you've described sounds professional. It sounds like two broken people finding each other. It's not like that. Maybe it should be. The comment stayed with Noah as he walked back to his apartment through the cold afternoon. Was there something between him and Evelyn beyond professional respect? He'd been so focused on rebuilding his technical skills, on proving he deserved the opportunity, that he hadn't examined the connection itself. But Rachel's observation forced him to confront what he'd been carefully ignoring. The way his chest tightened when Evelyn entered a room. The way her opinion mattered more than anyone else's. The way her belief in him had become the foundation he built his new life upon. That evening, he found himself in the office long after everyone else had left, ostensibly working on final integration tests for the abstraction layer. But really, he was waiting. Evelyn kept late hours. It was one of the things that made her successful, and one of the things that was slowly destroying her relationship with her daughter. If he stayed long enough, she'd appear. She did, around 8:30, looking exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. You're here late, she said, leaning against his doorframe. So are you. I have an excuse. I'm a workaholic CEO with boundary issues. What's yours? I'm avoiding my apartment. It's too quiet. Makes me think too much. Evelyn came into his office and sat in the chair across from his desk. I do the same thing. Stay here until I'm too exhausted to think, then go home and collapse. It's a terrible strategy, but it works. How's Maya? Angry, disappointed, convinced I don't care about anything except this company. Evelyn rubbed her face. She's not entirely wrong. You came to her concert. Once. One concert out of dozens I've missed. One piano performance doesn't erase years of absence. She looked at him. How do you do it? How do you survive knowing you failed the people who mattered most? The question was so raw, so honest, that Noah felt it in his bones. I don't survive it. I just exist alongside it. The guilt becomes part of the background noise. Some days it's louder than others. Does it ever get quieter? I don't know yet. Ask me in another year. They sat in comfortable silence, two people bound by their mutual understanding of how badly life could break you and how hard it was to put the pieces back together. I met with my sister today, Noah said. First time in 4 years. Evelyn's expression shifted to something careful. How did that go? Painful. Necessary. She wants to meet you. Me? Why? Because I told her about you, about how you saved my life. She thinks... He paused, uncertain how to phrase it. She thinks there might be more between us than just professional respect. The air in the office changed, charged with something neither of them knew how to name. Is there? Evelyn asked quietly. Noah met her eyes. I don't know. I know I think about you constantly. I know your opinion matters more to me than anyone else's. I know that when you walk into a room, something in me settles, like I've been waiting without realizing it. But I don't know if that's gratitude or something else. And if it's something else, then I'm terrified. Because I don't know how to be that person anymore. The person who loves someone, who builds something with them, who risks everything on connection. That person died in a car accident 4 years ago. Evelyn stood and moved to his window, looking out at the city lights. I told myself after my divorce that I was done, that I'd focus on the company, on Maya, on things I could control, that love was just another system that eventually failed, and I was tired of debugging broken systems. She turned to face him. But then I met you and suddenly all my careful logic didn't matter. Suddenly I was taking chances that made no strategic sense. Suddenly I was human again, instead of just effective. Evelyn, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just being honest. That's what you've taught me. That honesty matters more than strategy. That being real is more valuable than being right. Noah stood, closing the distance between them until they were face to face. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let myself care about someone when I know how badly it can end. Neither do I. But maybe we figure it out together. Maybe we stop pretending we're fine and start admitting we're both disasters trying to learn how to be human again. That's a terrible foundation for anything. Or it's the only honest foundation there is. They stood inches apart, the tension between them so thick it felt solid. Noah could count the ways this was a bad idea. Boss and employee, both of them broken. The power dynamics alone would make HR lose their minds. But he could also feel something in his chest loosening, something that had been clenched tight for 4 years finally allowing itself to breathe. I need to do this slowly, he said. I need to know I won't destroy you the way I destroyed everything else. And I need to know I won't turn you into another project, another thing I optimize and control until it stops being real. Evelyn reached up and touched his face gently. So we go slow. We figure it out as we go. We let ourselves be disasters together. Noah kissed her. It was tentative, careful, both of them treating the moment like something fragile that could shatter if handled roughly. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. This is insane, Noah whispered. Completely insane. Your board will lose their minds. My board can survive scandal. The question is whether we can. They stood holding each other in Noah's office, the city lights witnessing their broken attempt at something that might eventually resemble healing. Neither of them had answers. Neither of them knew if this was wisdom or desperation. But for the first time in years, both of them felt like the risk might be worth taking. The following weeks were strange, charged with a tension that everyone noticed but no one mentioned directly. Noah and Evelyn maintained professional distance during work hours, but the shift in their dynamic was obvious to anyone paying attention. Sarah cornered Noah in the cafeteria to deliver a warning disguised as casual conversation. Whatever's happening between you and Evelyn, be careful, she said without preamble. Nothing's happening. Noah, I've worked with her for 5 years. I know what she looks like when she's just managing an employee versus when she's emotionally invested. And right now she looks at you like you hung the moon. Sarah paused. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying be aware of what you're risking. I know the risks. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're both using each other to avoid dealing with your actual problems. You're using her validation to avoid grieving your family. She's using your transformation to avoid confronting her failure as a mother. That might feel like connection, but it's really just mutual avoidance. The observation hit Noah like cold water. That's harsh. That's honest, which is what you claim to value. Sarah's expression softened. Look, I want this to work. I want you both to be happy. But happiness built on avoidance doesn't last. Eventually, you have to face the things you're running from. She left him sitting alone with his coffee and the uncomfortable truth that she might be right. That evening, Noah went to the cemetery for the first time in 4 years. The plots were in a section reserved for families, 3 headstones in a row that marked the end of everything he'd built. Catherine Reed, beloved wife and mother. Emma Reed, age 9, loved beyond measure. Sophie Reed, age 7, forever in our hearts. He knelt in the grass between his daughters' graves, his hands shaking, his chest so tight he could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I disappeared. I'm sorry I couldn't be strong enough to honor your memory properly. I'm sorry I spent 4 years being invisible instead of celebrating the life we had together." The graves offered no response. The dead couldn't forgive him. They couldn't tell him it was okay, that they understood, that 4 years of grief was proportional to the love they'd shared. He had to forgive himself, and that felt impossible. "I met someone," he continued, his voice breaking. "A woman who saw something in me worth saving, and I think I might be falling in love with her. And I don't know if that's betrayal or survival. I don't know if you'd want me to move forward or if you'd be hurt that I'm replacing you." The wind moved through the cemetery trees, carrying the smell of cut grass and distant rain. Noah stayed kneeling until his legs went numb, until the sun began to set, until he'd said everything that had been building in his chest for 4 years. "I'm going to try to live again," he said finally. "Really live, not just exist. I'm going to let myself care about someone, even though it terrifies me. I'm going to build something new, even though it means accepting that our life together is truly over." He touched each headstone gently. "I hope that's okay. I hope wherever you are, you want me to be happy. Because I'm going to try. I'm finally going to try." When he stood to leave, he felt lighter and heavier simultaneously. The weight of permission he'd given himself balanced against the grief that would never fully leave. But he also felt like he'd finally said goodbye. Not to his love for them, but to the guilt that had kept him paralyzed. He called Evelyn from the cemetery parking lot. "Where are you?" she asked. "Visiting my family, the first time since the funeral." "Are you okay?" "No, but I'm trying to be." He paused. "Can I see you? Not as my boss, not professionally, just as someone I care about." "Yes. Come to my house. Maya's at a friend's. We can talk." Evelyn's house was in the suburbs, a modern design with clean lines and too much space for two people. She opened the door in jeans and a sweater, looking more vulnerable than Noah had ever seen her. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," she said. "I almost didn't. I sat in your driveway for 10 minutes convincing myself this wasn't a mistake." "And?" "Still not sure. But I'm here anyway." They sat in her living room, all carefully curated furniture and art that suggested taste without warmth. Noah could see the effort Evelyn had put into creating a space that looked successful, and he could also see how little she actually lived in it. "Sarah talked to me," Evelyn said, "about us. She thinks we're using each other to avoid our real problems." "She told me the same thing. Is she right?" Noah considered the question honestly. "Maybe. Probably. But I think it's more complicated than that. Yes, I'm using your belief in me to rebuild my sense of worth. And yes, you're using my transformation to feel like you matter beyond quarterly earnings. But we're also two genuinely damaged people who understand each other in ways intact people never could. Maybe that's avoidance. Or maybe that's the only way broken things ever heal, by finding other broken things that fit. That's either profound or a rationalization for codependency. It can be both." Evelyn laughed despite everything. "How did you get so wise about emotional disaster? 4 years of having nothing to do except think. You learn a lot about yourself when you strip away everything else." They talked for hours, sharing histories neither of them had fully revealed before. Evelyn told him about her marriage, how it had crumbled under the pressure of her ambition, how her ex-husband had accused her of loving the company more than her family, how she'd been too proud to admit he might be right. Noah told her about the months after the accident, the therapy that didn't work, the medication that numbed without healing, the moment he'd walked away from his house and never looked back. "I was a coward," Noah said. "I chose invisibility over the hard work of actually healing." "You were traumatized. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I abandoned everyone who loved me because grief was too uncomfortable." Grief isn't uncomfortable. Grief is devastating. Grief is watching your entire identity dissolve and having to rebuild from nothing. What you did, disappearing, was a survival strategy. Not a good one, but survival nonetheless. Evelyn reached for his hand. "And now you're here, trying, building something new. That takes more courage than staying broken." Noah laced his fingers through hers, marveling at how natural it felt. "What are we doing, Evelyn? Really?" "I have no idea. Building something, risking something, letting ourselves be seen by someone who understands damage." She paused. "I know this is messy. I know it violates probably 15 different professional boundaries. I know my board would lose their minds if they knew. But I also know that for the first time in years, I feel like I'm living my actual life instead of performing someone else's version of success. And Maya? What happens when she finds out her mother is involved with the homeless man she hired? Maya already knows. She figured it out weeks ago. Told me I should stop pretending it was just professional respect. Evelyn smiled. She also said you're good for me, that you make me remember I'm human. That's a lot of pressure. So as being the person someone rebuilt their life around, we're even. They kissed again, less tentative this time, both of them leaning into the impossible possibility of connection. Outside, the night deepened and the city lights created their own constellation. Inside, two broken people tried to figure out if they could build something whole from their combined wreckage. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even particularly smart. But it was real in a way neither of them had experienced in years, and that reality felt worth the risk of everything they might lose. The abstraction layer went live on a Tuesday morning in early March, exactly 6 months after Noah had walked into Cross Dynamics' lobby, looking like someone who'd wandered in from a different dimension. The engineering team gathered in the main conference room to watch the system integration happen in real time, every screen displaying data flows that had been impossible just months earlier. Noah stood at the back, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. 6 months of work, thousands of hours of mapping and coding and testing, all coming down to whether the elegant theory he'd built could survive contact with messy reality. The first integration completed, then the second. Then data began flowing between systems that had never communicated before, translation happening seamlessly through the distributed abstraction layer exactly as he'd designed it. Response times that had been measured in seconds dropped to milliseconds. Error rates that had plagued the company for years plummeted to near zero. Sarah turned from her monitor, her expression caught between disbelief and elation. It's working! It's actually working! The room erupted in cheers. People hugged, high-fived, some just stared at their screens in wonder. Someone popped champagne despite the early hour. Noah found himself surrounded by engineers congratulating him, thanking him, treating him like he'd performed some kind of miracle. But all he could think about was how strange it felt to be celebrated for doing what he'd once done every day without acknowledgement. How 4 years of invisibility had recalibrated his sense of what accomplishment meant. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her face showing the kind of joy that came from watching an impossible gamble pay off. She caught his eye across the crowded room and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Noah nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging his throat. Later that afternoon, after the celebration had died down and people had returned to their regular work, Noah sat in his office staring at the successful deployment metrics. He should feel triumphant. He should feel validated. Instead, he felt empty, like he'd been running towards something for 6 months, and now that he'd arrived, he didn't know what came next. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Maya stood there, still in her school uniform, violin case slung over her shoulder. "Mom said I'd find you here," she said, coming in without waiting for invitation. "She also said you just saved the company millions of dollars and proved you're some kind of genius." "Your mother exaggerates." "My mother doesn't exaggerate about technical capability. She's ruthless about competence, remember?" Maya set down her violin case and studied him. "You don't look happy." "I am happy. This is what happy looks like on me. That's what depression looks like. I know because I've been researching it. For a school project," she added quickly, like that made it less obvious she was worried about him. Noah managed to smile. "I'm not depressed. I'm just processing. 6 months ago, I was reading philosophy on a street corner. Now I'm supposedly some kind of corporate hero. The transition is disorienting. Because you don't think you deserve it." The observation was so precise it hurt. "I think I got lucky. Your mother took a chance that could have gone terribly wrong." "My mother took a calculated risk based on evidence. There's a difference." Maya sat in the chair across from his desk. "Can I tell you something? And you have to promise not to tell her I said it. I promise. She's different since she met you, softer, more present. She actually came to my last 3 concerts. She asks about my day and listens to the answer instead of checking her phone. She laughs at dinner instead of reviewing reports." Maya's voice was fierce. "You gave me my mother back, so don't you dare sit here thinking you don't deserve to be celebrated, because what you've done is worth more than any system architecture." Noah felt his eyes burn. Maya, I'm not finished. You're also completely in love with her, and she's completely in love with you, and you're both pretending it's just professional respect or mutual understanding, or whatever corporate euphemism makes you feel safe. But it's not. It's love. And it's terrifying you both because you're afraid if you name it, it'll disappear or destroy you or turn into another thing that hurts. She stood, picking up her violin case. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to stop hiding behind gratitude and guilt, and you're going to actually let yourself be happy. Because life is too short and too fragile to waste it being afraid of joy. She left before Noah could respond, leaving him alone with the truth a 17-year-old had just delivered with the precision of a surgeon's knife. That evening, Noah went to Evelyn's house, not because she'd invited him, but because Maya's words had broken something open in him that couldn't be sealed back up. He rang the doorbell and waited, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. Evelyn answered in yoga pants and an old t-shirt, her hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. Noah, I wasn't expecting. Is everything okay? No, nothing's okay. Everything's completely not okay. He stepped inside without being invited. I love you. I'm in love with you. And it terrifies me because the last time I loved someone this much, I lost them in the most devastating way possible. But I can't keep pretending this is just mutual respect or professional admiration or two broken people finding comfort. It's more than that. It's everything. And I need you to know that before I lose my courage. Evelyn stared at him, her expression cycling through shock, fear, and something that looked like hope. Noah, I know it's messy. I know the power dynamics are complicated. I know your board will lose their minds. I know I'm still damaged and probably always will be. But I also know that you make me feel like I'm worth more than my worst moments. Like my past doesn't define my future. Like I deserve to be loved even though I failed catastrophically at protecting the people I loved before. His voice broke. So if there's any chance you feel the same way, I need you to tell me. Because I can't keep living in this ambiguous space where we're more than colleagues, but less than what we actually are. Evelyn took off her reading glasses slowly, setting them on the hallway table. When she looked at him again, tears were streaming down her face. I fell in love with you the night you played piano at the holiday party, she said quietly. Watching you transform your grief into something beautiful, that was the moment I knew this wasn't just about giving someone a second chance. It was about finding someone who understood that success and happiness aren't the same thing. That you can build an empire and still feel empty. That being seen by the right person matters more than being admired by everyone. Then why didn't you say something? Because I was afraid. Afraid of ruining what we'd built. Afraid of turning you into another thing I tried to control and optimize until it stopped being real. Afraid that if I loved you and lost you, I wouldn't survive it. She stepped closer. But Maya told me tonight that fear isn't a good enough reason to avoid joy. That I've spent too long protecting myself from pain by refusing to risk happiness. Maya's smarter than both of us. Maya's always been smarter than both of us. Noah closed the distance between them and kissed her properly, without hesitation or careful boundaries, with all the messy, desperate hope of someone who'd stopped believing in second chances until one appeared. Evelyn kissed him back with equal intensity, both of them clinging to each other like drowning people who'd finally found solid ground. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. This is insane, Evelyn whispered. We've established that. The board is going to lose their minds. Let them. You own controlling interest. They work for you. The media will have a field day. Billionaire CEO in relationship with former homeless employee. The headlines will be brutal. Then we don't hide it. We own it. We tell the truth. That you saw someone who was invisible, and I saw someone who'd forgotten she was human, and we found each other in the middle of our mutual disasters. Evelyn laughed through her tears. That's either the worst PR strategy ever or the most honest one. I vote honest. They moved to the living room, collapsing onto the couch together, both of them exhausted from months of pretending their connection was less than it was. Maya appeared on the stairs, watching them with obvious satisfaction. Finally, she said, I thought I was going to have to lock you both in a room until you figured it out. How long have you been eavesdropping? Evelyn asked. Since I love you, it was very romantic, also very overdue. Maya came down the stairs fully. So what happens now? Now we figure it out as we go, Noah said. We stop pretending we have everything under control and admit we're making this up as we go along. That's how most good things happen, Maya said. Mom's always trying to plan everything perfectly, but the best things in her life happened when she stopped controlling and started trusting. She grabbed her jacket from the hallway closet. I'm going to Emily's house to give you 2 privacy. Try not to overthink this. You're both disasters, but you're good disasters together. After Maya left, Noah and Evelyn sat in the quiet of her living room, the enormity of what they'd admitted settling around them. What do we do about work? Evelyn asked. The company policy is clear about relationships between supervisors and employees. Then change the policy, or I stop being your employee. Sarah's been hinting that I should start my own consulting firm. I could contract with Cross Dynamics while building my own client base. You'd do that? Walk away from the stability? I didn't survive 4 years on the street by needing stability. I can build something new, with you beside me instead of above me. Noah took her hand. But first, I need to ask you something. What? Will you marry me? Evelyn's eyes went wide. What? I know it's too soon. I know it's reckless. I know we should date for a reasonable period, make sure this is sustainable, get therapy, probably sign a prenuptial agreement. He squeezed her hand. But I spent 4 years being careful and strategic and protecting myself from feeling anything. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be the person who sees something real and commits to it completely. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Noah, we've only been, I know, tell me I'm being insane. Tell me we should slow down. Tell me anything except that you don't feel what I feel. Evelyn stared at him, her expression showing the war between caution and desire, between protecting herself and risking everything. Yes, she said finally. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because it's smart or strategic or recommended by relationship experts, but because I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of optimizing my life for success instead of happiness. I'm tired of treating love like another system that needs debugging. She pulled him closer. So yes, let's be disasters together. Let's make choices that look insane to everyone else but make perfect sense to us. They kissed again, sealing a promise that had no business working but somehow felt more right than anything either of them had done in years. The wedding happened 3 months later, small and private, just family and the inner circle of friends who'd watched them both rebuild their lives. Rachel stood as Noah's best woman, still not entirely convinced this wasn't some elaborate grief response, but willing to support him anyway. Sarah officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. Maya played violin during the ceremony, a piece Noah had written specifically for the occasion. The vows they wrote themselves were honest to the point of brutal. I promise to love you even when you're impossible, Evelyn said. I promise to let you fail without trying to fix you. I promise to see you as whole despite your brokenness. I promise to build something with you that's messy and real and nothing like what anyone expects from a billionaire CEO and the man she found on a street corner. I promise to let myself be loved even when I feel unworthy, Noah responded. I promise to stay visible even when disappearing feels safer. I promise to build a future without forgetting my past. I promise to be your partner, not your project. I promise to remind you that success means nothing if you're not actually living your life. They exchanged rings, simple bands, nothing ostentatious. And when Sarah pronounced them married, the small gathering erupted in cheers that felt disproportionate to the size of the crowd. At the reception held in Evelyn's backyard, Rachel pulled Noah aside. Are you sure about this? She asked. It's been less than a year since you were homeless. Maybe you're moving too fast. Maybe. Probably. But I spent 4 years moving too slow, and it nearly destroyed me. Noah watched Evelyn across the yard, laughing with Maya and some of her friends. I'd rather risk moving too fast with someone who makes me want to be alive than spend another second being careful and empty. That's either wisdom or rationalization. It can be both. Rachel hugged him tightly. Catherine would have liked her. Evelyn, I mean. She would have appreciated someone who didn't let you disappear into self-pity. Catherine would have been terrified by how reckless this is. Catherine was terrified by most of your decisions, but she loved you anyway, That's what love is, choosing someone despite the risk, not because the risk is gone. The first year of marriage was harder than either of them expected. Noah launched his consulting firm and immediately faced the terror of being responsible for his own success without the safety net of cross-dynamics infrastructure. Evelyn struggled with sharing control, with letting someone see her vulnerabilities, with being a wife and mother and CEO without letting any of those identities consume the others. They fought, loudly, about money and boundaries and whose past trauma was affecting current decisions, about whether Noah's independence was healthy assertion or trauma response, about whether Evelyn's need for control was leadership or avoidance of intimacy. But they also learned, slowly, painfully, how to be two whole people instead of two broken halves trying to complete each other, how to support without fixing, how to love without losing themselves. Noah continued therapy, finally addressing the grief he'd been avoiding. He cried through entire sessions, rage-screamed into pillows, wrote letters to his daughters that he burned in Evelyn's fireplace. The process was devastating and necessary, and Evelyn held him through the worst of it without trying to make it better or faster or easier. Evelyn cut her work hours, started attending all of Maya's concerts, learned to delegate in ways that actually empowered her team instead of just redistributing her control. She discovered that the company didn't collapse when she wasn't personally managing every detail, and that discovery was both liberating and terrifying. 2 years after the wedding, Noah's consulting firm had grown to 15 employees. He specialized in helping companies integrate complex systems, building abstraction layers that allowed disparate technologies to communicate seamlessly. His reputation spread through the industry, the formerly homeless man who understood systems so deeply he could fix things other experts had declared unfixable. But his proudest accomplishment had nothing to do with business success. With Evelyn's support, he'd established a foundation that trained homeless individuals in technical skills, data analysis, coding, system architecture. The program provided housing, education, job placement, and ongoing support. It didn't save everyone. Some people weren't ready. Some people needed different interventions. But for those who were ready, who just needed someone to see their potential instead of their circumstances, the program was transformative. Carlos, the teenager who'd offered Noah a tarp years ago, was the foundation's first graduate. He now worked as a junior developer at a startup, making enough to support his mother and younger siblings, taking night classes to finish his computer science degree. "You did this," Carlos told Noah at the foundation's second anniversary celebration. "You showed us that being invisible doesn't have to be permanent, that someone can see you and believe in you, and that belief can change everything." "I didn't do anything except survive long enough for the right person to notice." "Exactly. You survived, and then you taught the rest of us how to survive too." At the celebration, Evelyn gave a speech about the foundation's impact, about how investing in overlooked people created value that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports. Maya played violin. Rachel attended with her family, finally convinced that Noah's choices, however unconventional, were leading somewhere real. That evening, driving home through the city where Noah had once been invisible, Evelyn reached over and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "That night you asked me to marry you, on the street corner outside the market." Evelyn laughed. "I never actually asked you to marry me that night. I just knelt down and said, 'Please marry me,' without thinking about whether you'd take me seriously." "I took you seriously. That's why I challenged you to prove you meant it. And I bought a ring and asked you properly. Best decision either of us ever made." They drove in comfortable silence, the city lights creating patterns against the darkness. Noah thought about the man he'd been. Broken, invisible, convinced his life was over. He thought about the moment Evelyn had seen him, really seen him, and refused to accept his self-imposed invisibility. He thought about the journey from that sidewalk to this car, from hopelessness to purpose, from isolation to love. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Saying yes to all of this? The job? The relationship? The visibility?" "Every day," Noah said honestly. "Every single day I wake up afraid this is all temporary, that I'll do something wrong and lose everything again, that I don't deserve this happiness so it'll be taken away. But every day I also wake up grateful, grateful that you saw something in me worth saving, grateful that I had the courage to try, grateful that surviving isn't the same as living, and I finally learned the difference." He squeezed her hand. The fear doesn't go away. I just learned to live alongside it. That's all any of us can do. Feel the fear and live anyway. At home, Maya was still awake, studying for finals at the kitchen table. She looked up when they came in, her expression showing the particular wisdom of children who've watched their parents become real people. "Good event?" she asked. "Good event," Evelyn confirmed. Carlos told everyone how the foundation changed his life. The foundation didn't change his life, you two did, by being willing to see people everyone else decided were invisible. Maya closed her textbook. That's the real story, not billionaire saves homeless man, not even unlikely love transforms both people. The real story is that you both chose to see each other as human beings instead of categories. And that choice changed everything. Later, lying in bed with Evelyn beside him, Noah stared at the ceiling and thought about Maya's words. The real story. Not transformation or salvation or any of the narratives people wanted to impose, just recognition. Just two people choosing to see each other fully, to believe in each other's worth, despite overwhelming evidence of failure and damage. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Evelyn whispered back. "Even though you snore, even though you leave coffee cups everywhere, even though you're still convinced you don't deserve happiness." Especially because of that last one? Especially because of that last one. 5 years after the wedding, on an ordinary Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday except for how extraordinary ordinary had become, Noah sat in his office at the consulting firm he'd built. Photos covered his desk. Evelyn laughing at something Maya had said, Rachel's kids at their last visit, the foundation's graduating class, and one photo he'd allowed himself to frame, Catherine, Emma, and Sophie on a beach vacation, all of them sandy and sunburned and perfect. He touched the frame gently, the way he'd learned to touch memories without being destroyed by them. "I'm okay," he told them quietly. "I'm finally okay. It doesn't mean I stopped loving you. It doesn't mean I forgot. It just means I learned how to carry the love and the loss simultaneously, how to build something new without erasing what came before." The door opened. Evelyn stood there, slightly out of breath, her expression showing the barely controlled chaos of someone who'd run from a meeting. "Come with me," she said. "Right now. There's something you need to see. I have a meeting in... Cancel it. This matters more." They drove to the neighborhood where Noah had once been invisible. The market was still there, still serving the community with the same mix of languages and cultures. But next to it, where an empty lot had moldered for years, stood a new building. The sign above the entrance read, Reed Foundation Community Center. Noah stared in disbelief. "What is this?" "This is what we've been planning for 6 months. A permanent home for the foundation. Training facilities, housing support, job placement services, mental health resources. Everything someone needs to rebuild their life, all in one place." Evelyn took his hand. "And there's more. Come inside." The center was beautiful, modern but warm, functional but dignified. In the main hall, a bronze plaque caught the light. In memory of Catherine, Emma, and Sophie Reed, may their light continue to guide others home. Noah couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only stand there reading those names over and over, tears streaming down his face. "You remembered them," he finally managed. "Of course I remembered them. They're part of your story, part of what made you who you are. I couldn't build something in your honor without honoring them too." Evelyn wrapped her arms around him from behind. "This isn't just about you surviving. It's about transforming survival into legacy, making sure that your family's memory creates something beautiful for people who need hope." Noah turned and held her, both of them crying in the empty hallway of a building that represented everything they'd built together, not from perfection, but from broken pieces carefully assembled into something whole. The Reed Foundation Community Center opened a month later to a crowd that included everyone whose life had intersected with Noah's journey, from Carlos and the other foundation graduates to Sarah and the Cross Dynamics team, from Rachel and her family to Maya and her friends. Even Rosa, Noah's first landlord, attended, bringing her grandchildren to see what the quiet man from apartment 3C had built. Standing at the podium to speak, Noah looked out at the faces of people who'd witnessed his transformation, from invisible to visible, from broken to healing, from isolated to connected. I'm not going to tell you a fairy tale, he began. I'm not going to pretend that one person believing in you fixes everything, or that love conquers all, or that surviving trauma makes you stronger. Those are nice stories, but they're not true stories. The truth is messier. The truth is that Evelyn didn't save me. She just refused to let me stay invisible. The truth is that I'm still damaged, still grieving, still sometimes wake up terrified that everything good will disappear. The truth is that healing isn't linear or complete. It's ongoing, it's daily. It's choosing to exist fully even when existence hurts. But here's what's also true. Being seen matters. Being treated like your life has value matters. Being given a chance to prove your worth matters. And sometimes, when broken people find each other and choose to build something together, they create something more resilient than anything whole people could construct. This center isn't about me. It's not even about the foundation. It's about every person who's ever felt invisible. Every person who's ever been defined by their worst moment or their current circumstances instead of their potential. Every person who just needs someone to believe they're worth the risk. So, to everyone here today, especially those of you who are where I was 5 years ago, invisible and convinced your story is over, I want you to know your story isn't over. It's just waiting for the chapter where someone sees you, where someone believes in you, where you start believing in yourself. And maybe that someone is in this room right now. Maybe they're looking at you the way Evelyn looked at me that night on the street corner, seeing past the circumstances to the person underneath. If you're that someone, don't walk away. Don't let fear or logic or reasonable caution talk you out of taking the chance, because sometimes the most reckless thing you can do is also the most important. The applause that followed wasn't polite or perfunctory. It was recognition. It was 300 people acknowledging that Noah had told them something true, something that mattered beyond inspirational platitudes. After the speeches and the tours and the celebrations, after everyone had gone home and the center was quiet, Noah and Evelyn stood in the main hall beneath the plaque honoring his first family. They would have loved this, Noah said quietly. Catherine would have loved that something good came from something so terrible. Emma would have loved the education programs. She always believed everyone deserved to learn. And Sophie, his voice broke. Sophie would have loved that we called it a center for hope. It's their legacy too, not just yours. I spent so long thinking I had to choose between honoring them and moving forward. Like loving you meant betraying them. Like building something new meant forgetting what I'd lost. And now I understand that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for them. Building this doesn't erase them. It just means that the capacity for love I developed with them didn't die in that accident. It survived. It grew. It found new expressions. Noah pulled Evelyn closer. They made me someone capable of loving deeply. You reminded me I still was that person. This center is what happens when those two truths exist together. They stood in the silent hall, two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and built something that transformed individual healing into systemic change. The story that had started with a kneeling billionaire and a homeless man reading philosophy had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted. Not salvation or redemption, but recognition. Not fixing or saving, but seeing and believing. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, millions of people moving through their lives. Some of them invisible, some of them broken. All of them carrying stories that hadn't been told yet. And in the Reed Foundation Community Center, those stories would find space to breathe, to transform, to become something more than survival narratives. Because Noah and Evelyn had proven something that seemed impossible until it wasn't, that being seen can change everything, that taking a chance on someone who seems unchanceable can transform not just them, but you, that the most radical act in a world designed to make people invisible is simply refusing to look away. Years later, when people asked Noah about that night on the street corner, about the moment a billionaire knelt and asked him to marry her, about the impossible beginning that led to everything else, he would tell them the truth. She didn't save me. She saw me. There's a difference. Saving someone suggests they're helpless, that they need rescue. Seeing someone suggests they're already whole, already valuable, already worthy. They just need someone to recognize it. He would pause, thinking about the journey from that sidewalk to this life. And once someone sees you that way, once they treat you like your existence matters, You start seeing yourself differently too. That's not salvation, that's recognition. And recognition is what changes everything. The story that began with "Please marry me" ended not with happily ever after, but with something more honest. Two disasters learning to be human together, building something meaningful from their combined wreckage, proving that dignity restored can change not just individual lives, but the systems that had rendered those lives invisible in the first place. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real.